Hi, I'm Leah Nelson, 33 years old, and a teacher in Denver. I've always believed family meant unwavering support and acceptance, a sanctuary where you could be your authentic self without judgment. I grew up in what I thought was a close-knit family, where Sunday dinners were sacred traditions and holidays were marked by laughter and warmth. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Everything changed at that Sunday dinner in September. There I was, standing humiliated in front of everyone, being called a failure by the very people who should have been my biggest supporters. They had no idea that my net worth was about to leak and change everything. What I did next shocked them all, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. I studied hard, followed the rules, and did everything I could to make my parents proud. My younger sister, Ashley, however, was the golden child from the moment she was born, 4 years my junior. She had this effortless charisma that drew people to her. While I was grading papers on weekends, she was building her social media presence, turning her natural photogenic qualities into a budding influencer career. "You should take a page from Ashley's book," my mother would say, scrolling through Ashley's Instagram feed with admiration. "She understands how the world works nowadays." I remember smiling and nodding, swallowing the bitter pill of comparison that had become my daily medicine. My parents, Linda and Robert Nelson, weren't bad people, at least not in the traditional sense. They provided for us, gave us good educations, and never skimped on material necessities. But emotional support? That was distributed with glaring inequality. They were entranced by Ashley's world, her glamorous photos with celebrities, her partnerships with beauty brands, and later, her relationship with Chad, an investment banker with family connections that opened doors I never knew existed. The pattern was subtle at first but grew more obvious over time. When I graduated with my teaching degree, my parents hosted a small dinner at home. When Ashley finished her communications degree, they rented out the local country club. My achievements were acknowledged with polite nods. Hers were celebrated with champagne and professional photographers. I told myself it didn't matter. I loved teaching, loved seeing the light in my students' eyes when they grasped a new concept. The quiet satisfaction of making a difference in young lives was enough for me. Or so I thought. Christmas 2019 marked the first major crack in my self-deception. Ashley and Chad had announced their engagement, and the family was abuzz with wedding plans. "Leah," Ashley said, cornering me in the kitchen as I washed dishes after dinner, "Chad and I found the perfect venue, but we need to put down a deposit by next week." "That's great," I replied, genuinely happy for her despite everything. "The thing is," she continued, lowering her voice, "we're a little short right now. Chad's bonus doesn't come through until February, and the venue won't hold the date that long." I knew what was coming next. "Could you loan us $15,000? Just until February. I swear we'll pay you back with interest." $15,000, my entire emergency fund. But she was my sister, and I wanted to believe in her promises. "I'll transfer it tomorrow," I said. The smile that lit up her face almost made it worth it. Almost. February came and went, no repayment. When I gently brought it up during a family dinner in March, Ashley laughed it off. "Oh my God, are you seriously counting pennies when I'm planning the biggest day of my life?" My mother chimed in. "Leah, don't be petty. It's your sister's wedding." That was when I first felt it. A small flame of resentment. Carefully banked but never quite extinguished. The wedding was extravagant. I stood beside Ashley in a bridesmaid dress I hated, but had no say in choosing. Watching her marry Chad in a ceremony that cost more than my annual salary, the $15,000 I contributed was never mentioned, never acknowledged. It simply disappeared into the black hole of Ashley's wants and needs. Summer 2021 brought another family gathering, this time to celebrate my parents' 30th wedding anniversary. I'd just been passed over for a promotion at school, losing to a colleague with less experience but more aggressive self-promotion skills. "You'll never be as successful as Ashley," my father said matter-of-factly over dessert. "You don't have the killer instinct. Nothing wrong with that. The world needs teachers too. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the softening of what had to be a joke. It never came. Instead, Ashley jumped in with a story about how she'd just secured a major sponsorship deal with a skincare brand, and the moment passed as if my father hadn't just casually shattered my self-worth. Thanksgiving 2022 was when I finally tried to address the elephant in the room. Ashley had been hinting about borrowing money again, this time for a business opportunity that she was frustratingly vague about. "I think we need to talk about family and money," I said carefully as we cleared the table after dinner. "The boundaries seem a bit blurred." My mother's laugh was sharp. "What boundaries? We're family." "The $15,000 I loaned Ashley for the wedding was never repaid," I pointed out, "and now she's asking for more." The silence that followed was deafening. "You're being ridiculous," my father finally said. "That was a gift for the wedding. No one expected you to be repaid." "I did," I countered. "Ashley promised." "You're too sensitive," Ashley cut in, her voice dripping with condescension. "We were joking about the repayment. I can't believe you took that seriously." I looked around the table. My parents were avoiding eye contact. Chad was smirking into his wineglass. Only my cousin Emma, a family lawyer who rarely attended these gatherings, was watching me with something akin to sympathy. "I think I need some air," I said, pushing back from the table. Outside, I sat on the porch swing and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Had I misunderstood? Was I really the problem? The gaslighting was so effective that I actually began to doubt my own memory. Emma joined me a few minutes later, sitting silently beside me before finally speaking. "You know they're taking advantage of you, right?" Her words were like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. "They don't mean to," I said automatically, the defense mechanism so ingrained I couldn't help myself. Emma gave me a sidelong glance. "Don't they?" That question lingered with me through Christmas, through New Year's, through the cold Denver winter and into spring. Don't they? Life went on. I taught my classes, graded papers, attended mandatory family functions where I was alternately ignored or used as a punchline. But something had changed inside me. I was watching now, really watching, cataloging the subtle digs and not-so-subtle favoritism with new eyes. And meanwhile, I had a secret. 5 years earlier, feeling creatively stifled and financially insecure on a teacher's salary, I had started a small side business. Cozy Crafts LLC began as nothing more than a hobby, handmade scarves and hats that I sold on Etsy during winter breaks. But it grew, slowly at first, and then with surprising momentum. I never told my family. At first, it was because I didn't want to hear their dismissive comments about my little hobby. Later, as the business grew, it became a deliberate omission. This was mine, something they couldn't diminish or take credit for. By 2023, Cozy Crafts had expanded beyond knitwear to include home decor, sustainably sourced children's toys, and a line of educational materials based on a teaching tool I developed and patented. I had a small warehouse, 7 employees, and distribution deals with 3 national retailers. I was also a silent partner in 3 popular Denver restaurants, having met a talented chef at a small business owner's networking event who needed capital but not another voice in the kitchen. My net worth, carefully managed by a financial advisor I trusted implicitly, had quietly grown to $2.3 million, and no one in my family had a clue. I drove a modest Honda Civic, lived in a comfortable but unassuming condo, and wore clothes from mainstream department stores, not out of necessity, but choice. The money wasn't the point. The freedom it represented was. The knowledge that I could walk away at any time was a private comfort I hugged to myself during particularly difficult family gatherings. Then came my grandmother's death in August 2023. She had been my refuge during childhood, the one person who seemed to see me clearly and love me without conditions or comparisons. Her loss left a physical ache in my chest. At the reading of her will, I learned she had left me $25,000. Money she'd saved specifically for me. "For my Leah," the will stated, "who sees beauty where others don't look." I was touched beyond words. planning to use the money to establish a scholarship in her name for creative arts students. But there was a problem. My father, as executor of the will, had temporarily redirected the funds to help Ashley and Chad with a down payment on a new house. It was, he assured me, just a short-term loan. They would repay it as soon as Chad's next bonus came through. I felt numb as he explained this, not even having the energy to protest. It wasn't about the money. I didn't need it. It was about my grandmother's wishes being disregarded, about my inheritance being redistributed without my consent. That brings us to September 18th, 2023, Sunday dinner at the Rosewood Country Club in Connecticut, where my parents had recently relocated to be closer to Ashley and Chad. I had flown in specifically for this dinner, having been told there was an important family announcement. The announcement, as it turned out, was that Ashley was pregnant with their first child. "We're going to need a bigger house now," she gushed, showing ultrasound pictures around the table. "The one we put a deposit on isn't going to be enough space." "Such wonderful news," my mother cooed. "Your father and I will help however we can." I offered my congratulations, genuinely happy at the prospect of becoming an aunt, when Chad's voice cut across the table. "Yeah, we're thinking of using the rest of Leah's inheritance to upgrade to the Colonial on Maple Street, since she's obviously not using it for anything important." The table went silent. I stared at him, then at my sister, then at my parents. No one would meet my eye. "What do you mean?" "The rest of my inheritance," I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the roaring in my ears. Ashley waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It's not like you need it. You're still driving that ancient Honda and wearing Target clothes." "That money was Grandma's wish for me," I said quietly. "She specifically left it to me." "And what would you do with it?" my father challenged. "Put it in a savings account earning 0.5% interest? Ashley and Chad have real expenses, a baby on the way. They can put that money to good use." "Unlike you," Ashley added with a laugh. "Wasting away in that little apartment, grading papers for kids who probably don't even appreciate you. When are you going to get a real career, Leah?" That was when something inside me broke. Or perhaps it was when something inside me finally clicked into place. "I need to use the restroom," I managed to say, pushing back from the table. Instead, I walked straight out of the restaurant and into the parking lot where my ancient Honda waited faithfully. Rain had started to fall, matching the storm brewing inside me. I sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling on the steering wheel, and for the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to feel the full force of my anger. They had taken my loan, my inheritance, and my dignity. They had belittled my career, my choices, my very existence, and they would keep taking, keep diminishing, for as long as I allowed it. No more. I pulled out my phone and called Emma. "I need legal advice," I said when she answered. "How do I protect myself from my family?" The quiet approval in her voice when she responded told me I had made the right call. Over the next few weeks, I met with Emma and her colleagues at Harrison & Associates. I collected evidence, bank statements showing the transfer of my loan to Ashley, emails promising repayment, text messages discussing my inheritance being redirected, social media posts from Ashley showing purchases made with money that should have been mine. I discovered that Chad had a history of financial mismanagement and that Ashley's influencer income was not nearly as substantial as she claimed. They were living well beyond their means, floating on credit and family bailouts, primarily from my parents, but with my unwitting contributions as well. I also learned that Ashley had been systematically undermining me to my parents for years, painting herself as the responsible sister helping the hopeless one. The evidence was in emails and texts. "Leah's so lost. Mom, I'm worried about her. Did you see what Leah posted? So embarrassing. We need to help Leah find direction in life." The betrayal cut deep, but it also clarified my path forward. On October 5th, 2023, I met with my legal team and formulated a plan. It wasn't about revenge. I told myself it was about justice, about standing up for myself after years of being pushed down. My opportunity came sooner than expected. Ashley and Chad were hosting an engagement party, not their own, but for Chad's brother, on November 12th at the Crystal Ballroom in the Fairmont Hotel, Chicago. The entire extended family would be there, along with friends and business associates. It was the perfect stage. I prepared meticulously. I bought a designer dress, Valentino, midnight blue, classic and understated, but unmistakably expensive. I had my hair and makeup done professionally. I arrived exactly 30 minutes after the party started, when everyone would be present, but before the formal toasts began. The room was a sea of familiar faces, aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, many of whom I hadn't seen in years. Ashley held court near the champagne fountain, resplendent in a form-fitting dress that showcased her tiny baby bump. Chad stood beside her, one hand possessively on her lower back, the other clutching a tumbler of scotch. My mother spotted me first, her eyes widening at my appearance. "Leah, we didn't think you were coming." The unspoken, "You weren't really invited," hung in the air between us. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Family is everything, isn't it?" She looked uncertain, perhaps detecting something different in my tone, but was quickly distracted by another guest. I circulated through the room, exchanging pleasantries, observing the dynamics I'd been blind to for so long, the way people deferred to Ashley, the way Chad name-dropped and bragged about deals that I now knew were largely fictional, the way my parents basked in reflected glory. At precisely 8:30 p.m., I gave a small nod to Emma, who had positioned herself near the AV equipment. The lights dimmed slightly, and a projection screen descended from the ceiling at the front of the room. "What's happening?" I heard Ashley ask. "The toasts aren't supposed to start yet." I moved to the center of the room as the first slide appeared on the screen. A bank statement showing my $15,000 transfer to Ashley in 2019, followed by her text promising repayment with interest. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying in the suddenly quiet room, "I'd like to make a toast of my own." The next slide showed an email exchange between my father and the lawyer handling my grandmother's estate, explicitly redirecting my inheritance to Ashley and Chad's house fund. "To family," I continued, raising my glass, "and to truth." Slide after slide appeared. Ashley's social media posts showing lavish purchases made the same week she told me she couldn't repay her loan. Text messages between Ashley and my parents discussing how to approach me for more money. An analysis of Ashley's actual influencer income versus her claimed earnings, prepared by a forensic accountant. "What is this?" Ashley's voice was shrill, cutting through the murmurs that had begun to rise from the assembled guests. I turned to face her directly. "This is the truth. Ashley, something this family seems to have a problem with." "This is fake," she cried, looking desperately around the room. "She's lying." "Am I?" I countered, keeping my voice level. "Every document here can be verified, every text message, every email, every bank statement. Would you like to see the originals?" Chad stepped forward, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. "This is inappropriate. You're making a scene at my brother's engagement party." "The way you made a scene discussing how to spend my inheritance at dinner last month?" I asked. "The way you've been making a spectacle of me for years, painting me as the family failure while helping yourselves to my money?" My father pushed through the crowd, reaching for my arm. "Leah, that's enough. Let's talk privately." I stepped back, avoiding his touch. "No, Dad, we're done with private conversations where you tell me what to think and how to feel. We're done with the gaslighting and the manipulation." The final slide appeared, a statement of my net worth, certified by my accountant, $2.3 million. The gasp that went through the room was audible. "While you've been calling me a failure," I said, addressing my family but speaking to the entire room, "I've been building something real, not smoke and mirrors like Ashley's inflated social media presence or Chad's exaggerated business acumen." I turned to the crowd. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to reclaim my dignity. For years, I've been treated as less than, as the family charity case, as someone to be pitied or ignored, no more. My Aunt Margaret stepped forward, her face a mask of shock. I had no idea. Leah, the way they talked about you. I know, I said gently. It's not your fault. Deception was the family business, apparently. My mother's face had gone ashen. Why didn't you tell us about your business? Your money? The question was so lacking in self-awareness that I almost laughed. Would you have believed me? Or would you have found a way to diminish it, to explain it away? Would you have asked me for more loans that were never intended to be repaid? Ashley was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. You're trying to ruin me. On purpose. Just because you're jealous. I'm not trying to ruin you, Ashley, I replied. I'm simply showing everyone who you really are, who you've always been. I nodded to Emma again, and the screen went dark. I've filed a lawsuit to recover the money that was taken from me without consent, I announced to the silent room. Not because I need it, but because it was mine to give or withhold. My legal team has also prepared cease and desist letters regarding the defamatory statements that have been made about me. I looked directly at my parents. I won't be attending family dinners anymore. I won't be available for emotional or financial exploitation. I'm drawing a boundary that should have been drawn years ago. With that, I set down my untouched champagne and walked out of the ballroom. Head high, heart pounding, but spirit lighter than it had been in years. The aftermath was swift and dramatic. Emma called me the next morning to report that Ashley had tried to scrub her social media accounts, deleting posts that corroborated my claims, but screenshots had already been preserved as evidence. Chad's family, embarrassed by the scene at their son's engagement party and concerned about potential financial entanglements, began distancing themselves. Chad's brother postponed his wedding indefinitely. My phone blew up with messages and calls, some supportive, some angry, some merely curious. I responded to none of them, taking a week off from teaching to center myself and plan my next steps. The lawsuit proceeded. Ashley and Chad hired an expensive attorney who quickly realized they had no defense. They settled out of court for the full amount plus legal fees, though I later learned they had to borrow money from Chad's parents to do so. Ashley's carefully cultivated social media presence imploded as followers connected the dots between her lavish lifestyle posts and the reality of her financial situation. Brands began pulling sponsorships, unwilling to be associated with the controversy. Within days, she had lost nearly 100,000 followers. My parents' reaction was more complex. My mother called daily, leaving voicemails that evolved from angry denials to tearful apologies. My father sent a formal letter, drafted by his attorney, disputing my version of events, but offering a settlement to preserve family harmony. I instructed Emma to respond with a single sentence. Truth is not a version, it simply is. The most unexpected consequence came from within my own life. My principal, upon learning of my business success, called me into her office. I went prepared to defend my right to outside employment, only to be met with admiration instead of censure. You've built something remarkable while remaining dedicated to your students, she said. That's the kind of real-world success story we should be celebrating. She offered me a position developing entrepreneurship programs for the district's high schools, a role that would allow me to share my experience with students while maintaining my teaching credentials. I accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to turn my private victory into something that could benefit others. As the holidays approached, I made a decision. I would not return to Connecticut for Christmas. Instead, I invited a few colleagues and friends to my condo for a small celebration. People who knew me, respected me, and wanted nothing from me except my company. It was during this gathering that I received an unexpected visitor. Emma arrived with a bottle of wine and news. Your parents are divorcing, she said once we had a moment alone. Your mother filed last week. I absorbed this information with surprising calmness. Because of what happened? Emma shrugged. Partly, but these things are usually just the final straw. Your father has apparently been controlling the family finances in ways your mother wasn't fully aware of. When everything came out at the party, she started asking questions about their money too. I nodded. feeling a complex mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. And Ashley? Working retail at Target. Actually, Emma said with a small smile. Part-time, in the women's clothing department. Chad's firm put him on probation after some discrepancies came to light in his expense reports. There was no satisfaction in hearing this, only a sense of cosmic balance being restored. They weren't bad people, my family, just flawed, human, and now facing the consequences of choices they'd made and values they'd prioritized. As winter turned to spring, I made another decision. Denver held too many memories, too many connections to my old life. I needed a fresh start. Seattle had always appealed to me with its vibrant art scene and progressive education system. In April 2024, I put my condo on the market, accepted a teaching position at an innovative charter school in Seattle, and began looking for commercial space to expand Cozy Crafts to the Pacific Northwest. The move was liberating. I bought a house with a view of Puget Sound, decorated it exactly as I pleased, and set up a home office where I could manage my business when not teaching. For the first time in my life, every decision I made was truly my own, unclouded by the expectations or judgments of others. In November 2024, I attended the Seattle Small Business Excellence Awards, where Cozy Crafts was nominated in the Sustainable Manufacturing category. As I sat in the audience, listening to the accomplishments of my fellow entrepreneurs, I felt a profound sense of peace. And the winner is Leah Nelson, Cozy Crafts LLC. Walking to the stage to accept the award, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass podium. Confident, successful, self-possessed, not defined by family dynamics or others' perceptions, but by my own choices and achievements. Thank you, I said to the applauding crowd. This award means more to me than you can know. 5 years ago, I started Cozy Crafts at my kitchen table with nothing but yarn, determination, and a belief that I had something of value to offer the world. Today, we employ 23 people across 2 states, partner with sustainable material suppliers in 4 countries, and help artisans turn their passions into livelihoods. I paused, looking out at the sea of supportive faces. What I've learned on this journey is that true worth isn't measured by others' validation or by numbers in a bank account. It's measured by integrity, by the courage to stand in your truth even when it's difficult, and by the positive impact you have on the world around you. As I concluded my speech and returned to my table, a notification appeared on my phone, an email from my mother. I ignored it, focusing instead on the conversation and celebration happening around me. Whatever she had to say could wait. I was no longer defined by that relationship, no longer desperately seeking approval from those who couldn't or wouldn't give it. Later that evening, as I stood on the balcony of the event venue overlooking Elliott Bay, a man approached and introduced himself. James Harrington, he said, extending his hand. Congratulations on your award. Your speech was inspiring. Thank you, I replied, noting his warm smile and the intelligent curiosity in his eyes. I run a business incubator for education-focused startups, he continued. Your work integrating educational tools with sustainable manufacturing is exactly the kind of innovation we're trying to support. We talked for an hour, our conversation flowing effortlessly from business to philosophy to favorite Seattle coffee shops, when he asked for my card, suggesting we continue the discussion over lunch someday. I found myself looking forward to the possibility. As I drove home that night, the Seattle skyline glittering against the dark water of the Sound, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the humiliated woman trembling in her car in a Connecticut country club parking lot to this moment of professional recognition and personal contentment. The path hadn't been easy or straight. There had been moments of doubt, of grief for the family relationships I'd once believed in, of fear that I was making the wrong choices, but there had also been moments of clarity, of strength I didn't know I possessed, of connections with people who saw and valued me for exactly who I was. My phone buzzed again. Another email from my mother. This time, I opened it. Leah, it read, I hope this finds you well. I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened. I won't make excuses for how we treated you. There aren't any valid ones. I just want you to know that I'm trying to understand. To be better, your father and I are divorcing, as you may have heard. Ashley and the baby are living with me now. She's struggling, but learning. We all are. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No expectations, no demands. Just an open door if you ever want to walk through it. Love, Mom. I closed the email without responding, not out of anger or resentment, but because I wasn't ready yet. Perhaps someday I would be. Perhaps someday we could build something new on the ashes of what had been destroyed. Not the same, not pretending the past hadn't happened, but something honest, something real. For now, though, I was focused on my present and my future, on teaching my students, growing my business, exploring a potential new relationship, and continuing to discover who Leah Nelson truly was when not defined by family expectations or limitations. The revelation of my worth hadn't just been about money, it had been about recognizing my own value, independent of others' perceptions, about setting boundaries and standing firm in my truth, about choosing growth over stagnation, authenticity over approval. As I pulled into my driveway and looked up at the house I had chosen, the life I had built, I felt a sense of completion, not an ending. There was still so much ahead, but the satisfying conclusion of one chapter and the exciting beginning of the next. The journey hadn't been about revenge after all, though that's what I'd thought I wanted at first. It had been about reclamation, taking back my power, my voice, my right to define myself. In that, I had succeeded beyond measure.